Hello everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of the Complete History of series. Today's episode will be all about my hometown zoo, the Louisville Zoo. Recently, the zoo bid farewell to an iconic species and two of their longest residents, Mikki and Punch, the African and Asian elephants. These golden girls have been with the zoo for decades and were a big part of my annual zoo visits, but now they have officially retired to a sanctuary out of state, and while I am sad, I wanted to do something special for them, as a way to give them a proper send-off. That's why I'm giving them their own history video. But then I thought, instead of just celebrating these two elephants, why not look back on all the other elephants that have called the Louisville Zoo home over the years, and the rest is history. So in this episode of the Complete History of series, I will be going over and talking about nearly every elephant to have called the Louisville Zoo home. I'll go over each elephant by name, when they were born, when they died, or where they are today, along with the history of the elephant exhibit itself, as well as any other additional trivia and events related specifically to the Louisville Zoo or its elephants. This is going to be a very long video, so make sure you get comfortable and grab your peanuts, popcorn, slushies, or whatever zoo foods you get, and pack your trunks, because this is the complete history of elephants at the Louisville Zoo. Let the adventure begin. Before I talk about all the elephants, it's important to go over the history and development of the Louisville Zoo itself. The creation of the Louisville Zoo is a rather long, complex story, but I'll try and summarize it. And don't worry, there's some elephant lore sprinkled throughout. The idea for a large city zoo in Louisville dates back many decades before the current zoo opened. The first mentions of one was back in the 1920s, when civil leaders said a zoo would be feasible for the city. In 1928, a group called the Louisville Zoological Park Society was formed, and they tried to get school children to contribute a nickel each to buy an elephant. That effort failed. Later, in 1948, a group of citizens tried to establish a zoo and wanted the city to donate a 25 to 35 acre site for it, but these plans also failed. Fast forward to 1951 when a group of Louisville Jaycees undertook a campaign to raise $125,000 to obtain animals, construct a building, and operate a zoo for a year as part of the state fairgrounds. That plan, just like the last two, also failed, after they only managed to raise $20,000. Finally, in 1962, then Louisville Mayor William O. Cowger announced a donation of $1.5 million to the city by James Graham Brown for the establishment of a zoo. The following year, zoologist Dr. Ivo Puglian was named director of the zoo and oversaw development of it. At this point, it was full steam ahead in creating the zoo. In 1964, the current zoo site was purchased, and soon after a master plan would be created. Early on in development, during the whole brainstorming phase, there was plans to create two elephant exhibits. One would be located in the African section and would house African elephants, while the other would be in a Eurasian section and house Asian elephants. These plans wouldn't last long, and eventually only one elephant exhibit would be built, that being the African one. At last, on a cold January day in 1965, the Louisville Zoological Gardens officially broke ground. With construction starting, the Zoo Commission now had an important task to do. They had to obtain and acquire animals for the zoo. This is where we meet the first of many elephants in the Louisville Zoo's history. The first elephant to be involved with the Louisville Zoo was brought in just as construction was starting, that one being a young Asian elephant named Baby K. I couldn't find too much information on Baby K, and this was the only photo I could find of her. She was 7 years old in 1965, meaning she was likely born sometime between 1958 and 1959. She was originally born in Cambodia before then being brought to the US and was then sold to the Polak Brothers Circus. In February 1965, the circus came to Louisville for their annual performance of the Carousel Shrine Circus. During that performance, the circus and the Carousel Shrine Temple made plans to donate Baby K to the zoo, in honor of George Segnal, who was the temple recorder for 25 years. The circus wanted the zoo to take the elephant as soon as possible because she was costing too much to care for, especially since they already had many other elephants in the circus. The plan was for the circus to keep Baby K until the zoo had built the elephant exhibit. Seems simple enough, but unfortunately things were about to get complicated. Throughout the entire construction of the zoo, many problems occurred, which resulted in delays in construction and the zoo's opening. Some of the problems to plague construction included a bricklayer strike, equipment shortages caused by the Vietnam War, high bidding and construction costs, and inflation. Yep, even back in the 60s, inflation was just as bad as it is today. It got to a point where some exhibits had to be saved for a later construction phase, and one of those exhibits was the elephant one. With all the construction problems, the circus began to get impatient and wanted Baby K out of their care by April 1966, though this deadline would later be extended to the fall of 1966. At one point, the circus considered having Baby K sent to the nearby Mesker Park Zoo in Evansville, Indiana, until Louisville's exhibit was built. Unfortunately, this is where the story of Baby K ends, as plans to send her to Louisville would never go through due to all the previous issues. While she would be the first notable elephant in Louisville Zoo history, she would never actually be at the zoo. As for what happened to her after, I don't know. I couldn't find any other information about Baby K, but if I had to guess, she either continued with the circus or was sent to another zoo. Eventually, construction would resume, and by 1968 the zoo was just about finished. To promote the zoo's opening, a large float featuring a papier-mâché elephant was featured in the Kentucky Derby Parade. Soon after that, on May 1st, 1968, the Louisville Zoo train opened to the public, keyword being train. Only the train would be operational at this point, so while guests could ride the train, they couldn't walk the zoo grounds as construction was still ongoing. Fast forward to August 1st, 1968, when the Louisville Zoo held a soft opening to the public for weekends only. The zoo wasn't 100% finished yet, but it was good enough for the public to be able to preview it. There was just one problem with this soft opening. There weren't many animals to view, including elephants. With the Baby K plans falling flat, the zoo had to acquire elephants themselves. This would be quite expensive, as the price of an elephant at the time was about $5,000, or about $46,500 today, and it took time to find the right elephants. Thankfully, in late 1968, they were able to obtain their first elephant, which would later be joined by a second one in February 1969. Going back a bit to January 1969, the zoo would close to the public in order to finish construction. But finally, on May 1st, 1969, after many decades of failed attempts, many years of planning and designing, and many months of construction issues, the fully operational Louisville Zoo would officially open to the public. In the next chapter, I'll be going over all the elephants present at the zoo during the first year of operation. The first elephant I'm going to talk about that actually lived at the Louisville Zoo is appropriately the first one brought to the zoo, an African elephant named Mary. There's not too much information on Mary before the zoo, but I was able to find out she was born in the wilds of Africa in 1961, but wasn't captured until 1963. Originally, she lived at Lion Country Safari in West Palm Beach, Florida, before then being sent to Louisville on December 13, 1968, when she was 7 years old. Mary was known to be a favorite for any zoo employees who worked with her, although she did have her moments. For example, she was known to show fear and anger when a zoo veterinarian would do checkups on her. That vet would spend many months with Mary to help her get comfortable during these vet checkups, and thankfully she did. Another fact about Mary was that she was the largest of the zoo's 2 original elephants, and that's a good segue into the next elephant to discuss. The second elephant that was present for the zoo's opening was Kenya, who was also a female African elephant. And unlike Mary, there's a lot more information on Kenya prior to her arrival in Louisville. Kenya, similar to Mary, was also born somewhere in Africa around 1965. A year later, she would be captured by Louis Scoville and was brought to Jungle Land, USA in Thousand Oaks, California. She would stay there for a little bit before then being acquired by Buckles Woodcock and became part of a troupe of 7 elephants that performed with the Polak Brothers Circus. Kenya was the only African elephant performing with the circus at the time in the late 60s. After performing for only a year, she would go live at the circus winter quarters in San Antonio, Texas, before finally being brought to the Louisville Zoo at the age of 4 in February 1969, just 3 months before the grand opening. She was donated to the zoo by the Polak Brothers Circus and the Kozer Shrine Temple as a political gesture, since Louisville was one of their best shrine dates. She cost the zoo $5,800, or just over $51,500 today. At first, she was unnamed, but later received the name of Kenya. One fact about Kenya is that she was nearly blind in her right eye. The zoo feared that she had a cataract, but after an ophthalmologist examined her, it was determined not to be that, thankfully. Another thing to mention about Kenya is that she was the matriarch of the zoo's elephant herd, meaning she was the leader and dominant elephant who would take charge of the others. While Mary and Kenya were the only elephants exhibited at the zoo on opening day, there was actually a third elephant at the zoo on opening day that wasn't part of the elephant exhibit. That being Judy, the zoo's first Asian elephant, not counting baby K because she never lived at the zoo. Judy was born sometime around 1967, and while it's unclear exactly where she was born, some sources claim that she was born at the Kabul Zoo in Afghanistan. She was later sent to a private zoo in Nicholasville, Kentucky, known as the Animal Forest Zoo, where she would stay until the zoo closed and she would relocate to the Louisville Zoo on April 28, 1969, at about 2.5 years old. She was donated to the zoo by James Ross Todd, a member of the zoo's commission. Because Judy was younger than the zoo's other elephants, she didn't live in the regular elephant exhibit with them. Instead, she was placed in the children's zoo portion of the zoo, where the islands exhibit is today. There, children would pet her and feed her peanuts through a fence. Judy could also be considered the zoo's PR elephant, as throughout her first year she would make a few appearances outside the zoo in and around Louisville. One of her first appearances was when she traveled to different shopping centers as part of a campaign by the zoo to raise funds to buy a replacement giraffe, as one died just the day before Judy arrived. However, Judy's main claim to fame was being one of the star attractions in the zoo's chimpanzee show, which was a circus-style show featuring performing animals like dogs, ponies, and of course chimpanzees. Judy would perform a few tricks during the show, like skipping, hopping, as well as sitting and balancing on a tub. Throughout my time researching for this video, I found a few unknowns and mysteries related to the Louisville Zoo elephants, most of which are from the zoo's first year. They all have to do with elephant names or possibly different elephants altogether. Despite the lack of information, I do have some possible theories that could answer these mysteries. So first up is this newspaper ad from 1969, featuring an elephant named Twiggy. This is the only piece of information I could find about an elephant named Twiggy at the zoo. The theory I have for this is that the elephant featured here is actually Judy, and that Twiggy was either her original name before it was changed to Judy, or the name Twiggy was an error on the newspaper's part. Evidence to suggest this is Judy is the mentions of the children's zoo, which is where Judy was kept, and as far as I know, she was the only elephant kept in the children's zoo. So while I can't give a definitive answer, it's likely this Twiggy elephant is just Judy. The second mystery involves this elephant named Baloo, named not after the bear from the Jungle Book, but rather the Bank of Louisville, which donated the animal to the zoo. The only evidence of this Baloo elephant is this single newspaper photo from May 1969. The most likely answer to this mystery is the same as the previous one, and that this elephant is either Mary or Kenya, before or temporarily renamed. Although the newspaper did call the elephant a male, despite both Mary and Kenya being female, so who knows. And finally, we have yet another elephant named Mystery. I'm actually not sure if this one is from 1969, but it's likely. This clipping mentions a kid winning a contest to name an elephant with the name Coco. This one has stumped me. I guess it could be the same scenario as the previous two, but I just don't know. If anyone has any information on these elephant mysteries, please let me know, as I would like to have these questions answered and mysteries solved. While this video is meant to look back on all the elephants in the Louisville Zoo's history, it would feel wrong not to talk about the elephants exhibit's history, as it too has changed drastically over the years. So before I end this chapter, let's go over the elephant exhibit and how it originally looked. The elephant exhibit was one of the last things to be built for the zoo during its construction, as many delays and issues pushed its completion back. It was also pretty expensive, with the barn costing about $261,337, or roughly $2.5 million today when adjusted for inflation. Some of the money used to help build the exhibit were pennies and nickels donated by local school children. As for the exhibit itself, It was a large, mostly open space with lots of dirt and sand with few plants. The amount of space the elephants had was around 4,600 square feet, or 0.1 acres. So yeah, quite small, which would be a constant complaint about the zoo's elephant habitat for years to come. Although at the time, Louisville's exhibit was actually considered bigger than other neighboring zoos. The yard also featured a small pool in the center of the habitat, a large rock for elephants to scratch their backs on, a random wall on one side of the yard, and 2 maple trees for shade. One of the most notable things about the original exhibit was the existence of a large concrete moat surrounding the entire yard perimeter. While considered outdated by today's standards, in the 60s these types of enclosures were seen as state-of-the-art, as the moats allowed for visitors to get an unobstructed view of the animals while also keeping them safe. The elephant moat was 8 feet wide and 6 feet deep, and before you ask, yes, elephants did occasionally fall into the moat, usually from being pushed down there during play. Thankfully, the moats had steps, so the elephants could easily get out of them. And to make sure no one would jump the moat and enter the exhibit, a small metal fence was added to the grassy area in front of the moat. Finally, the back of the exhibit was the site of the towering barn, which served as the shelter for the elephants. It originally featured a weird roof design with overhangs on each side of the visitor path, and had 2 openings, with one in the actual habitat and one close to the moat. As seen in some old home videos, there appeared to be a large window-like structure on one side of the barn. This was likely an indoor viewing area for the visitors to see the elephants if they were off exhibit, but I can't confirm this. And on that note, we are finally done talking about the Louisville Zoo and their elephants during the first year. Now we move on to the 1970s, where we will meet many new faces throughout the zoo's first decade, including a few fan-favorite attractions. Throughout 1970, nothing really changed regarding the elephants or their exhibit. It wouldn't be until 1971 when the first big change occurred involving the zoo's elephants. In October 1971, Judy officially retired from performing in the chimpanzee show, and was also no longer displayed in the children's zoo. Instead, she would be moved to the main elephant exhibit to join Mary and Kenya. One thing I didn't mention about Judy is that she was known to be a big fan of rain, and so when she moved into the elephant yard, she would often play and splash around in the exhibit pool, like a little kid when it rained. Also, remember when I mentioned the concrete moat and how elephants occasionally fell into it? Well, guess which elephant was often the one to fall into it? That's right, Judy. In fact, the zoo even kept track of the times she fell down there. For example, in 1972, she fell in the moat 7 times, either from falling down there by accident, or by being pushed down there by another elephant. Speaking of 1972, something weird happened that year involving elephants. Around April of that year, 3 circus elephants traveling with the Polak Brothers Circus got stranded while the circus was traveling. So the Louisville Zoo offered to temporarily house the 3 elephants until they were able to catch up with the circus. And after a short stay, they were sent to Little Rock, Arkansas to rejoin the circus. This was a strange event, as I've never heard of something like this happening before. Like, sure, I've mentioned circuses donating animals to zoos, but never a zoo becoming a temporary home for stranded circus animals. And you know what makes this scenario even more crazy? It almost happened again the following year, 1973. That year, one of the circus's tigers got sick and had to be quarantined, which resulted in 10 tigers, 1 lion, 6 bears, and 6 elephants being stranded in Louisville. Only this time the zoo refused to accept them because they didn't have enough room for all those animals. 1973 was also the year the zoo acquired its next elephant to join Mary, Kenya, and Judy. This elephant would later go on to become one of the zoo's most beloved residents, and one many people remember fondly, that being Punch, the Asian elephant. Punch was born in the wilds of Thailand around 1970, and that same year she was brought to the US. She first lived at the Southwick Zoo in Mendon, Massachusetts, before then being sent to the Louisville Zoo on November 28, 1973, when she was 3 years old. Punch was known to be a bit of a stubborn elephant who liked to mess around and cause some trouble, even as she got older. However, many who worked with Punch would describe her as being the perfect elephant to work with. She often taught keepers what you could and couldn't do with an elephant, but never in a mean way. Also, while the zoo has never confirmed this, I believe Punch's name comes from Punch and Judy. Since the zoo already had an elephant named Judy, It made sense to name the other elephant Punch after the famous puppets. With the addition of Punch, the zoo now had a total of 4 elephants, the most that they would ever have in their history. Moving on to 1974, that would be the first mention of elephant training demonstrations. These shows would happen daily in the elephant exhibit, where keepers would have elephants do training exercises and circus-style tricks, similar to what Judy did in the chimp show, only now all of the elephants were trained. And speaking of Judy, this would also mark the end of her time in Louisville, as she would leave the zoo sometime between 1974 and 1975, and was transferred to the Baton Rouge Zoo in Louisiana. She would stay there for the next few decades until her death on March 29, 2013 at the age of 46. Her cause of death was a chronic gastrointestinal irritation, a side effect of arthritis treatment. 1975 would be a big year for elephants at the zoo, as 2 major events happened this year. First, the zoo acquired another elephant, this one being named Assam, or as she would later go on to be known as, Babe, who was another Asian elephant. Babe was born in the wild around 1967, before then being brought to America where she would tour with the Ringling Brothers and Barnum & Bailey Circus Blue Unit for many years. She then came to the Louisville Zoo on May 29, 1975. Her arrival to Louisville was for a specific reason, as beginning on June 3, 1975, the zoo started offering elephant rides to visitors for a small fee. This is one attraction that many fondly remember doing when they visited the zoo throughout the 70s and 80s, and Babe happened to be the first elephant to give rides. The very first elephant ride given at the zoo was for then Louisville Mayor Harvey Sloan and his daughter. In order to accommodate the elephant rides, a new area would be constructed on an empty plot of land behind the elephant exhibit. This area featured a large gazebo-like structure with an overhang, and stairs to be able to get onto the elephant's back, and a large dirt circle around the yard where elephants would be slowly guided around by a keeper or trainer. And to make sure an elephant didn't wander off, there was a wooden fence perimeter around the yard. When she wasn't giving rides, Babe would be kept with the other 3 elephants in the elephant enclosure. Also on a side note, I don't know if any of the other zoo elephants gave rides to people, or if it was just Babe. I do know that Mary never did because she was wild-caught and was considered too dangerous for rides. The rest of the 70s were pretty uneventful regarding the zoo's elephants, but a few things stick out. For example, in 1976, Kenya made her television debut as a spokes elephant for Monfred Optical, which was a company that made glasses. Unfortunately, the commercial featuring Kenya is lost media, but I did find a description for the ad in an old newspaper. In the commercial, Monfred Optical was promoting their new Hercules glasses, which they claimed to be unbreakable and tough, so they had Kenya demonstrate by stepping on the glasses. An interesting fun fact about this commercial was that it took 15 to 20 takes to get a shot of Kenya stepping on the glasses, as she kept missing it and would accidentally step on things she wasn't supposed to, like the foot of her commercial co-star, local weather reporter Ange Humphrey. For her work, Kenya was paid $100, or $569 today. In 1977, the Elephant Barn underwent a renovation in which a new roof was added and new heaters were installed inside the barn. And that about wraps up the 1970s portion of this elephant look back. Now we move on to what many may consider the peak of the Louisville Zoo elephants, the 1980s. By 1980, the Louisville Zoo's growing pains began to wear off, as they were starting to become a top-tier facility with many improvements and expansions upon the horizon. They were officially named the State Zoo of Kentucky, and soon after they were granted accreditation from the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, or AZA. As for the elephants, one major change involving them also occurred in 1980. In July, Babe was transferred to the Columbus Zoo in Columbus, Ohio for breeding purposes, and she would stay there until February 1991, when she was then sent to the Fort Worth Zoo in Fort Worth, Texas. Throughout her time there, she had 4 elephant calves, but tragically all of them were stillborns. And even more tragically, on January 24, 2008, while Babe was in labor with her 4th calf, she died in her sleep at age 40. Her cause of death was a torn uterus due to her unborn calf being oversized and not entering the birth canal. Such an unfortunate event. I apologize if that last bit upset you, but let's move on to 1981, as that's when things start to get pretty busy. That year, the MetaZoo Education Center opened, which is a building that serves as a teaching facility perfect for summer camps and field trips. It also features a few animal exhibits and a few educational props, with some of them related to elephants. For example, the MetaZoo once displayed elephant toenails, and currently they display elephant tusks and a full skull. Interesting thing to note about the skull is that the zoo previously housed an elephant skull in their old education facility, so I wonder if the skull in the MetaZoo is the same one as before, or if it's a different one. Also in July 1981, the zoo held its first ever Elephant Festival. This event was all things elephant related. It featured the previously discussed elephant training demonstrations, along with multiple activities and contests along with visitors getting to watch the elephants get baths, and they even walked the elephants around the zoo grounds. The highlight of the event was when a group of U of L football players challenged an elephant to a game of tug-of-war. Safe to say the elephant won. And finally, to close out 1981, a major change came to the zoo's elephant rides, as starting in the early 80s the zoo would now have third-party companies provide their own elephants for rides instead of using elephants the zoo owned. Now unfortunately, since these elephants weren't owned by the zoo, I wasn't able to find out exactly how many elephants were used for rides, or which specific elephants were used. I was only able to find 4 named elephants that were present at the zoo to give rides. 2 of them were Asian elephants named Bimbo and Pete. But the other 2 I'll save for the next chapter as they're important for a specific event. As for who provided the rides to the zoo, it was originally elephant trainer Smokey Jones, but later on it was elephant trainer Peter Luvis and his company Luvis Enterprises. 1982 would be a big year for the zoo elephants, as 2 notable moments occurred this year. The first was an unfortunate loss for the entire zoo family, as Kenya, one of the zoo's original elephants, passed away on June 12, 1982, at the young age of 19. Her cause of death was originally thought to have been pneumonia, but was later determined to be salmonellosis, a contagious disease caused by intestinal bacteria. The disease is commonly found in wild bird poop, and while it's rare for elephants to catch it, this is believed to be the way Kenya caught the disease. A few days prior to her death, keepers noticed Kenya stopped eating and had inflamed intestines. The whole elephant house was put under quarantine to make sure no elephants caught the disease, and to help treat Kenya, but it was too late. To make matters worse, on June 18th, 6 days after Kenya died, Punch caught the same disease. She had stopped eating, but keepers assumed that she was just mourning the loss of Kenya, but after a blood test, salmonellosis was found in her system. Fortunately, however, Punch was able to recover from it. With the loss of one elephant, the zoo soon acquired another one, and that brings us to the second most important moment to happen with the elephants in 1982, as well as the introduction of the next elephant resident of the Louisville Zoo, that being an African elephant named Jana. Jana is thought to have been born at the Grooteschur Zoo in Cape Town, South Africa in 1980. In 1982, she was acquired by the International Animal Exchange in Port Clinton, Ohio, where she was then purchased by the Louisville Zoo and arrived there on August 17, 1982, at the age of 2.5 years old. She was brought to the zoo as a replacement for Kenya. She was initially kept behind the scenes or in the elephant rides area, but eventually made her public debut in late August. Fun fact, when Jana first came to the zoo, she was nameless, and a contest to name her was held by the Louisville Times, soon after her debut. It wasn't until October when the name Jana was revealed at the zoo's 1982 Elephant Festival, and to celebrate her arrival, a puppet show was held in her honor. Similar to Judy from 1969, Jana was considered the PR elephant, as throughout the early to mid-80s, she made many appearances outside of the zoo. Her most notable appearances were in the Kentucky Derby Festival's Pegasus Parade, as she marched in the parade from 1983 to 1985. A lot of training went into making sure Jana could handle the sights and sounds of a parade. For example, to make her comfortable with loud noises, a policeman rode his motorcycle at full speed around her, and the U of L marching band was brought in to play their instruments in front of her. Jana was also taken to the nearby Cherokee Park to practice walking the parade route. Overall, Jana was completely fine with everything. Well, everything except for the sounds of nearby trains. During the 1983 parade, not only did she walk the route, but when there was a halt in the parade, she would perform tricks for the crowd. Her 1984 appearance was also notable as she was there to help celebrate the zoo's 15th anniversary. One other Jana appearance to mention occurred in 1986, when she left her permanent mark at the Louisville Museum of Natural History and Science Center's Handprint Hall of Fame, or I guess in this case, footprint. She joined the Hall of Fame that year along with a few U of L players and coaches, along with Muhammad Ali. However, I don't know if her footprint is still at the Science Center, as the Handprint Hall of Fame isn't really a thing anymore. Sadly, 1986 would end in heartbreak for the zoo family, as that December saw the loss of another elephant resident. Mary, the last of the zoo's original elephants, unexpectedly died inside the elephant barn on December 12, 1986, at the age of 25. At 12:30 p.m. that day, keepers found Mary dead on the barn floor, and after a 5.5-hour autopsy, her cause of death was determined to have been a stroke. And just like any other animal that dies in a zoo, Mary's remains were buried in an unmarked grave on zoo property. However, that almost wasn't the end of Mary. Remember when I talked about the Meta Zoo and how it has a large elephant skull there? Well, along with that skull, they also have a complete ostrich skeleton, which is actually one of the zoo's original ostriches that died before Mary did. And after it died, scientist Davy Chai skinned it and put its bones back together and put it on display. Well, after Mary died, the same scientist was interested in doing the same thing to her body. He wanted to skin her and put her bones on display. However, this never ended up happening. History repeats itself in 1987. Similar to Kenya and Jana, while the zoo lost one elephant, they would soon get another. That elephant would go on to become one of the zoo's most well-known animal residents, and one you are most likely familiar with. The elephant I'm talking about is African elephant Mikki. Mikki was born on a South African game preserve in Zimbabwe somewhere around 1985. Mikki's childhood before the zoo wasn't a happy one, as she was a victim of a government-led culling operation. Which, if you aren't familiar with culling, it's this horrible procedure of slaughtering dozens of animals for no reason other than population control. And in Mikki's case, that culling was allowed by the government. Fortunately, Mikki along with 7 other baby elephants were rescued from culling and brought to the Premier Wildlife Ranch, an animal dealer in Granbury, Texas. The Louisville Zoo then purchased her for $20,000, or $57,000 today. And she arrived there on July 28, 1987, at 2 years old. She was given the name Mikki because her ears were very round, similar to that of Mickey Mouse. However, it's important to note that her name isn't spelled the traditional way Mickey is spelled. It's not M-I-C-K-E-Y, it's actually spelled M-I-K-K-I. The name was originally meant to be temporary, but was later made her permanent name. One characteristic of Mikki is that she only had one tusk, that being her left tusk. This is because when she was young, she fell on her right tusk and the impact of her fall pushed the tusk up into her face, and it got infected, so they had to get it surgically removed. Another characteristic of Mikki is that she has a chunk taken out of her right ear. This was caused by a freak accident sometime around 2017, when her ear was torn on a gate latch inside the elephant barn. Mikki previously developed a hole in that same ear many years earlier, which is normal for elephants, so it's likely the gate latch got caught on that hole. When Mikki first came to the zoo, Jana was still being used as the PR elephant, but that position would soon go to Mikki. Because Mikki was still small at only 4 feet tall and 500 pounds, it wasn't uncommon to see zoo employees walking her around the zoo during visiting hours. One time she went inside the nearby giraffe house and ended up scaring a couple of visiting chimpanzees who were displayed at the house at the time. She also visited the tiger enclosure. Mikki was also paraded around the zoo during their 19th anniversary celebration in 1988. She was also a regular at the zoo's summer camp programs. Speaking of parades, Mikki was also featured in the Pegasus Parade, and just like Jana, she had to undergo training to get her comfortable with the parade. That involved bringing her to DuPont Manuel High School, where the U of L marching band played trumpets and drums around her. She would march in the Pegasus Parade from 1988 till 1995, with her 1989 and 1994 appearances being noteworthy, as that year she celebrated the zoo's 20th and 25th anniversaries. 2 other events I want to mention are one time when she appeared at Old Cardinal Stadium at a Louisville Redbirds game, where she walked around the baseball field with the Redbirds mascot on her back. And in 1993 she was a part of the zoo's $25 million fund drive and made appearances at the Louisville Galleria and on Jefferson Square in downtown for PNC Bank's Zoo Appreciation Day. So far, this video seems to go over everything, from talking about individual elephants to trivia to their deaths to events. What haven't I mentioned yet? Oh yeah, poop! That's right, hopefully you aren't eating for this next part, it's gonna get a bit gross. So have you ever wondered what zoos do with all the poop the animals leave behind? Well, while some of it gets thrown out and disposed of, the Louisville Zoo wanted a new way to get rid of it. Say hello to Zoo Poopy Doo, a way to help get rid of poop while also helping the environment and benefiting people. Zoo Poopy Doo is a product made mostly with poop from animals, including elephants. It is mixed with hay, straw, and wood shavings and is sold to the public. As fun fact, animal poop, especially from elephants, makes great fertilizer. Zoo Poopy Doo started in 1989 and continues every year in April for the zoo's Party for the Planet event. I guess you could say this was a crappy way to end the chapter. Alright, let's move on to the 90s. This is where we start to slow down in terms of elephant trivia, but there's still many important things that occurred in this decade.
Things are a bit cramped at the Louisville Zoo. That's why Liberty National Bank has made a contribution to help with expansion. We'll always be here for the people of our community. And for that matter, the animals too.
The 90s started out strong when the zoo unveiled its $75 million master plan. Technically it was created in 1989, but I'm putting it here in this part of the video. This master plan would completely change the zoo and make it look completely different than what was already there. Some things to come from this master plan included the Herp Aquarium, the Islands exhibit, and a Great Apes facility, later known as Gorilla Forest. Sadly, most of the exhibits planned never got built, and one of them happened to involve a new complex for elephants. Towards the back of the zoo, around where Glacier Run and the Tiger exhibit are today, would have been a new 14-acre Asian area featuring a 6-acre elephant exhibit. Not only that, but there also would have been a working logging camp as a part of the exhibit. Hopefully the elephants wouldn't have been the ones doing the logging. It's honestly a shame that this never got built, as a 6-acre elephant exhibit would have been ahead of its time, and maybe even revolutionized future elephant exhibits going forward. But while this elephant exhibit never got built, the current elephant exhibit did receive a renovation in the early 90s. This remodel included upgraded lighting and the installation of a movable door inside the barn to provide a space for sick elephants. The fence in front of the moat also changed again from a chain link fence added in the 80s to a wooden fence that looks more African. This is the fence that's currently there today. Finally, the early 90s was the first mentions of elephant aerobics, which was a new version of the elephant keeper demonstrations. The demonstrations themselves were mostly the same, they just made the name of it a bit more theatrical. 1994 would be a big year for the Louisville Zoo, as not only was that the year of the zoo's 25th anniversary, but it was also an eventful year for the elephants, or shall I say notorious, for a reason I'll discuss later. But first, something exciting. This year was the first time the zoo had ever tried to breed one of its elephants. While the zoo had had multiple baby elephants throughout its time, they've never had one born at the zoo, or even in the whole state of Kentucky. The reason for this is because the zoo didn't have any male elephants, they only had an all-female herd, and without a male, there couldn't be a baby. So how do you breed an elephant without a male present? With a little something called artificial insemination. If you aren't familiar with artificial insemination, let me explain it in a PG way. The procedure involves collecting DNA from a male elephant and then inserting the DNA into a female elephant in hopes that it will cause the elephant to get pregnant. This procedure is the most common way zoos breed elephants because it's much easier than having to transport male elephants to and from zoos all the time, especially since most zoos can't handle male elephants due to them being pretty dangerous to handle. But going back to the Louisville Zoo, they were hoping to breed Punch using this method. This was a big deal at the time since while this procedure had been done on many animals, it was relatively new for elephants. The zoo was hoping that Punch would be the first elephant to give birth through artificial insemination. However, while this breeding attempt failed, this wouldn't be the last time we will be discussing artificial insemination in this video. The other elephant event to happen in 1994 is the reason I say this year is notorious for the zoo. But before I explain why, we need a bit of background information. The elephants I'll be discussing here aren't ones the zoo owned, but rather the two elephants used for rides at the time. The first elephant was an African elephant named Gypsy, who was born in the wild in 1982, then captured in 1984, then brought to the Holly Wild Animal Park in 1986. She was then sold to Peter Luva's, where she would be used to give rides to people, and while I couldn't find exactly when she first appeared at the Louisville Zoo, she was present in 1994. The other elephant I need to discuss is another African elephant, and the most important one out of the two, that being Kenya, not to be confused with the other Kenya that was at the zoo from 1969 to 1982. This is a different one, and her name is actually pronounced Kenya. Kenya was born around 1974 before then being captured in 1976. She was a former circus elephant who now gave rides also by Peter Luva's. She first gave rides at the Louisville Zoo in 1985, and by 1994 she had given over 100,000 rides throughout her time. Alright, so the reason I keep saying this year is notorious is all because of Kenya, and something she did. But just a heads up, since this video is already very long, I will only be going over the basics of what happened. I will, however, be making a separate video on the whole event that goes into specific details not featured in this video. With that being said, let's talk about the elephant attack of 1994. On June 29, 1994, Kenya escaped her yard and severely attacked 28-year-old zoo visitor Troy Ramsey. The incident occurred around 8:30 p.m., just before the zoo closed, and the elephants used to give rides were being put away for the night. What is believed to have happened was Peter Luva's was busy securing Gypsy for the night, and Kenya got distracted by something, thought to have been a toy ball. She then opened a gate by herself and escaped the ride area. She was then spooked, which caused the attack. At some point she grabbed Ramsey and threw him 50 feet into the air onto a fence and tried to crush him. Ramsey was also dipped into the moat in the nearby monkey exhibit. As a result of the attack, Troy Ramsey had to have part of his spleen and pancreas removed. He also suffered from pneumonia, among other complications. Immediately following the incident, the zoo suspended elephant rides indefinitely. As for Kenya, sources vary, but it's believed she was either moved to the main elephant exhibit or stayed chained in the rides area. Troy Ramsey would later sue both the zoo and Kenya's owner, seeking damages and compensation. And while I couldn't find the outcome of the lawsuit, I did read some articles claiming he won the lawsuit, or at least reached a settlement. The zoo claimed that Kenya was just quote-unquote horsing around, with Kenya's owner saying she had no mean bone in her body, but this was widely disputed, as Ramsey argued that the elephant did try to kill him. After the attack, Kenya was given a full physical exam, and she was found to be perfectly normal, so no one was quite sure why Kenya did what she did, other than the obvious fact that she's a wild animal, and unpredictable. 5 weeks after the incident, the zoo decided to reopen the elephant rides after many investigations found the rides weren't the cause of the attack. However, Kenya would not be a part of the rides anymore, as she was replaced by an unnamed elephant along with Gypsy. The elephant rides wouldn't last too much longer after that, as in the following year, 1995, the zoo officially discontinued elephant rides. While a zoo spokesman would later say the ride's ending wasn't because of the incident, it's pretty obvious that the 1994 attack played a part in the zoo's decision to end the rides. The elephant ride area was soon after demolished and is now the site of the Boma African Petting Zoo. As for what happened to everyone involved since then, I was unable to find any information regarding Troy Ramsey today, or any of the humans involved in the incident. As for the elephants, Gypsy would later be sent to a private animal farm in Texas in 1997. Before then, in 2009, she was sent to the Dallas Zoo, where she still resides to this day. And what about Kenya, the main elephant in the story? Well, she unfortunately died in 1997 from a respiratory bacterial disease. Not much would happen throughout the mid-90s, but things began to change once we got into the late 90s. On January 8, 1998, longtime elephant resident Jana would leave Louisville and would be sent to the Knoxville Zoo in Tennessee in hopes that she would breed with their elephants. The move was originally meant to be temporary, as Louisville still owned Jana, and the move was more of a breeding loan, although she never did return to Louisville. There was, however, talk of moving Jana to an elephant preserve in Arkansas in 2003, but this never happened, and Jana would remain in Knoxville. She would remain in Knoxville for over 2 decades before in 2022 Zoo Knoxville announced the end of their elephant program and relocated their elephants to the Elephant Sanctuary in Hohenwald, Tennessee. Her move to the sanctuary was partially funded by the Louisville Zoo, and a year later she would arrive to the sanctuary on May 1st, 2023. Tragically, her stay at the sanctuary was short, as her health began to rapidly decline and she couldn't stand anymore. So on October 20th, 2023, sanctuary staff made the difficult decision to euthanize her at the age of 46. But as we've seen time and time again, when the Louisville Zoo is down one elephant, they end up gaining another. But this next one is a bit different. Going back a bit to 1997, the nearby Cincinnati Zoo was preparing for one of their elephants to have a baby, but there was just one problem. They didn't have enough space to accommodate a new baby along with all the current elephant residents they had, so they had to move them. Louisville was chosen due to its close proximity to Cincinnati. Soon after, they announced 2 elephants would be relocated to Louisville temporarily, and this is where we meet our next elephant resident. The newest elephant to join Louisville's herd was Sabu Hit, or just Sabu, a 10-year-old bull elephant who was the father of the yet-to-be-born baby in Cincinnati. Sabu is notable as he would be the first male elephant to officially live at the Louisville Zoo, not counting the ones used for rides in the past. Another Cincinnati elephant, Princess Shotzi II, or just Shotzi, was also supposed to go to Louisville around the same time Sabu did, but that would end up never happening. Sabu was born in the wild in 1988, presumed to be in Malaysia. He was brought to Cincinnati in 1991 before then being sent to Louisville on January 16, 1998, just 6 days after Jana left. The Louisville Zoo was hoping that Sabu would breed with Punch, especially after the artificial insemination process failed. However, Punch had other plans. As mentioned before, she was always a bit of a stubborn elephant, and was also now the matriarch of the herd, and she didn't take too kindly to the new bull in town. Any time that Sabu would try to make a move on Punch, she would discipline him. One time, Sabu was messing with Punch and he put one of his tusks in her mouth. Well, Punch apparently didn't like that, and she ended up breaking off a chunk of Sabu's tusk. If you think that's crazy, just wait, it gets worse. After breaking off one of the tusks, Punch knew that zoo employees were going to notice Sabu's broken tusk and try to find the broken pieces. So being a bit of a troll, she threw the broken pieces into the elephant pool so the keepers couldn't find them. To this day, zoo employees are still surprised by the level of intelligence Punch showed by doing that. And if you're wondering about Sabu, don't worry, his tusk grew back, but he would be given a steel tusk cap after the event. The last things to talk about in this chapter all involve Mikki. First, Mikki was supposed to be sent to another zoo at some point in the late 90s or early 2000s for breeding purposes, but those plans never came to be. Then, in 1998, Mikki was featured in a small parade of school children held at the zoo. This is notable as it was one of the last times the zoo walked one of its elephants outside of the enclosure. Finally, 1999 was the first reported year that Mikki began to make elephant-sized paintings. This usually involved Mikki holding a large brush in her trunk and making marks on a large canvas, or a keeper would paint the bottom of her foot with a color and she would step on the canvas. She would continue to do this for many years, making over 70 different paintings. The paintings were then usually sold at the zoo's gift shop or auctioned off for charity and conservation. Now we shall paint our way into the 2000s, where again not much happened, but what did happen was still super exciting. Towards the beginning of the 2000s, there wasn't much activity with the elephants, but there were a few elephant-adjacent things to happen around this time. For starters, in the year 2000, a newly restored 1919 Carousel was donated to the Louisville Zoo. It was then given the name of the Conservation Carousel. The reason it was given that name was because not only would the carousel feature the traditional horses, but it would also have new sculptures of zoo animals, primarily ones that are endangered. Among the animals are both an African and an Asian elephant, which are both endangered species. Speaking of sculptures, in April 2002, a statue of a baby elephant was donated to the zoo. The statue was called Ellie, or Eli, I'm not sure which one, and it was created by artist Meg White. It depicts a 2-year-old baby African elephant playing with a stick. The statue would cost over $20,000 and was donated to the zoo by Nancy Brindley, Bonnie Chapman, and Bob Blankenship, in memory of their parents, C. Fred and Cecilia Blankenship. The sculpture was found directly across from the elephant exhibit, and I believe at the time of this video it's still there, but it hasn't been mentioned what will happen with the statue given recent events. Lastly, in September 2002, Sabu would leave Louisville and be transferred to the Dickerson Park Zoo in Springfield, Missouri. He would stay there until 2007, when he made his grand return to Cincinnati. And ever since then, he's come and gone from that zoo. Sometimes he'll stay at the Columbus Zoo, but at the time of this recording, he's back at the Cincinnati Zoo's new elephant track exhibit. On the topic of elephant exhibit, by this point Louisville's elephant enclosure had remained mostly untouched since the zoo opened, and was definitely starting to show its age and become outdated. So in the summer of 2004, the zoo announced that the elephant exhibit would undergo a major renovation, the biggest in the enclosure's history. The newly remodeled exhibit cost around $1.14 million, and was done not only as a way to make the exhibit more modern, but also safer and more comfortable for the elephants. Construction started in fall 2004 and was completed in May 2005, so what changed? Well, for starters, they finally filled in the large moat surrounding the yard and landscaping was added on top of it, giving the elephants more room. In order to keep elephants from escaping now that the moat was filled, the now iconic green steel beams were added around the entire yard. While this made things safer, it did obstruct the elephants, making it harder to take photos and videos. Overall, with the moat filled in, the total amount of yard space the elephants had went up from 4,600 square feet to over 13,000 square feet, or about 0.3 acres, so still small, but better than before. Other things added was the large structure near the concrete wall, which gave the elephants plenty of shade, and more rocks and sand. The renovations didn't end there, as the inside of the elephant barn also changed. Now instead of the elephants standing on solid concrete, the floors were now equipped with rubber padding. It was also around this time that the indoor viewing area on the side of the barn was changed to an African rest stop, featuring a large mural and a safari van where people could climb into and take pictures in, like in this photo of me and my sister in the 2000s. When Sabu left Louisville in 2002, that left the zoo with only 2 elephants, Mikki and Punch. It would stay like that for the next 5 years, but soon after the exhibit renovation came some exciting news. In June 2006, the zoo announced that for the first time ever, Mikki was pregnant, and that the zoo was having a baby elephant. This was exciting as again, even though the zoo had had baby elephants in the past, one had yet to be born at the zoo, but now that was about to change, as one was going to be born in 2007. How Mikki got pregnant was because of the previously mentioned artificial insemination process, with the DNA of a male elephant being sent to Louisville. Mikki's baby would soon become the 15th elephant born through the process. So now you may ask, who's the father? Or rather, who provided the sample? It was an elephant named Jackson, located at the Pittsburgh Zoo, who, fun fact, has fathered the most elephant calves out of any elephant in captivity. While Mikki's pregnancy wasn't announced till 2006, she actually got pregnant in June 2005. The reason for the delayed announcement was because elephant pregnancies are quite complex, unlike humans. Elephants have the longest gestation period of any mammal. Their pregnancy can last up to 22 months. It lasts long so that an elephant's large, intelligent brain can have time to form. In total, Mikki was pregnant for 633 days, and towards the end, zoo employees ended up spending the night inside the elephant barn for many months, so that someone could be on hand to help Mikki when she goes into labor. Finally, after many months of waiting and planning, on Sunday, March 18, 2007, at 8 p.m., Mikki would give birth to a healthy baby bull, and weighing in at 285 pounds, he was already quite a big boy. Soon after the birth, the calf already began to move around and trumpet so loud that you could hear it hundreds of feet away. While the news of his birth made headlines all over Kentucky, it would soon be a while till the public could see him. As per usual with elephant births, the elephants would remain inside the barn so that they could bond, and the keepers can make sure there's nothing wrong with either Mikki or her calf. The wait wasn't too long, as on April 4, 2007, the new baby elephant made his public debut. Visitors from all over came to see him, and the crowds were 4 to 5 people deep. The baby elephant also helped boost zoo attendance, as he brought in about 2 million visitors to the zoo, all wanting to see the first elephant born in Kentucky. There was one problem with the baby, however, and it's something important. He didn't have a name. So shortly after his debut, the zoo ran a contest and asked the public to help give the little guy a name. Over 12,000 entries were submitted, with most people wanting to name him either Dumbo, Jumbo, or Horton, but the zoo encouraged people to come up with an African name. With that being said, once the contest was over, it was down to 3 names, and none of them were African related. The final 3 name choices were Angus, Jonesy, and Scotty, with all 3 names having some kind of background to them. Scotty came from one of the keepers who helped deliver the baby. Jonesy came from another keeper named Jones, who helped train other keepers on how to work with elephants. And Angus came from another elephant in Canada who had the same name. Ultimately, the name chosen for the baby elephant would end up being Scotty. Now that Scotty got his name and was now adapted to the zoo life, you better believe that the zoo went all out on marketing and promoting him, as several events involving Scotty would occur throughout his life. For example, the zoo held Scotty Days on August 11th and 12th, 2007, where the first 500 families who came to the zoo those days got a free poster of Scotty. Also, any person with the name Scotty or Scott got admission to the zoo for only $5. In 2008, Scotty was featured in his own documentary chronicling his life. Sadly, the documentary is currently lost, but it was said to feature interviews with zookeepers about Scotty, as well as some behind-the-scenes footage. A DVD of the documentary was given out to anyone who either bought or renewed their zoo membership in 2008. As Scotty got older, he began to be featured in the zoo's elephant aerobics training demonstrations, where he was taught tricks. The zoo also began to offer behind-the-scenes tours where you could meet Scotty and the other elephants, as well as having Scotty participate in field trips and summer camps. The most exciting event Scotty was a part of was back in August 2007, when he made a Make-A-Wish kid's dream come true. 13-year-old Elaine Pickering, who was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect, wished to work with zoo animals as part of her Make-A-Wish. So the foundation flew her and her family from Kansas to Louisville, and she got to interact with Scotty and feed him. As the years went by, Scotty continued to get older and bigger, and by 2010 he was now weighing in at 2,500 pounds. The zoo always made sure to celebrate his birthday every year with a huge party, something they would also do with the other elephants. But now we have reached the end of this portion of the video. I will now talk about the elephant trivia from both the 2010s and the 2020s. However, I should warn you, as the start of this next section doesn't start out happy, especially for Scotty.
Okay, man, sad news to report from the Louisville Zoo. Scotty, a baby elephant at the zoo, had to be put to sleep last night after becoming seriously ill last week. Eric King's live outside the zoo with a look at what happened and how they're dealing with this.
On Wednesday, May 12, 2010, Scotty, the zoo's beloved baby elephant, died at the young age of 3 years old. His cause of death was colic, a condition that causes severe gastric and intestinal problems. While this condition is mainly known to affect horses, it isn't uncommon for it to also affect elephants too. Scotty began to show side effects days prior to his death, and received immediate treatment. But even though he did improve slightly, his condition continued to get worse each passing day. He kept collapsing, and his bowel became distended, and so with him not getting any better, vet staff made the difficult decision to euthanize him on May 12th at 8:30 p.m. The news of his passing shocked all of Kentucky, and many came to the zoo to pay their respects. The zoo flew their flag at half-staff, which is considered a gesture of grief and mourning, and a small memorial was put out in front of the zoo administration office door, where people could leave flowers and letters in Scotty's memory. They were also asked to mail drawings and photos people made of Scotty. After his death, Mikki and Punch were taken off exhibit temporarily, so they too could mourn the loss of Scotty. In the years following Scotty's passing, the zoo was left with just Mikki and Punch, and while there wasn't a baby running around anymore, the two still continued to be a popular attraction at the zoo. Also in the years following Scotty's passing, zoos across the world began to rethink their elephant programs. Some chose to phase out elephants altogether, while others would keep them. By 2014, the AZA completely changed the requirements for elephant care that zoos would now have to go by, and many zoos had to make many changes to still be accredited. One of those was Louisville. Louisville's elephant exhibit remained largely the same as it was after the 2004 renovation, but it still had the problem of being way too small for the elephants. And with the AZA changing its elephant care requirements, the zoo had to come up with something, or risk losing their elephants altogether. Fortunately for them, they were already planning many major renovations around the zoo, mainly in the area the elephants are located in. In fall 2014, the zoo announced that the elephant exhibit would undergo a major overhaul as part of a $3.5 million plan to renovate the zoo. $500,000 used to redevelop the elephant enclosure was provided by the Metro government, but that's nothing compared to the $2 million donation given to the zoo by Gene and Sandra of the Harry Frasier family. Because of this, the new elephant exhibit would be called the Harry Frasier Elephant Encounter. The zoo hired the Whitenberg Construction Company along with PGAV architects to design and build the new exhibit, and construction began in mid-February 2015. It then took 10 months to complete. In early 2016, the newly renovated Harry Frasier Elephant Encounter opened as part of Phase 1 of the zoo's Africa renovation. So what was new about the elephant enclosure now? Well, the biggest change was the construction of a completely new area, which doubled the size of the old exhibit from 13,000 square feet to just about 27,000 square feet, or 0.62 acres. So it still wasn't even 1 acre, but yet again still an improvement of what was there before. To make room for the new area, the zoo demolished an exhibit for bongos, which was located directly across from the elephants. Most of what was changed and added was due in part to the new elephant care requirements by the AZA. Examples include new flexible fencing that could be used to facilitate a new calf. This remodel also saw the additions of new enrichment items, which are things to help improve the quality of life of an animal, for example toys. Some enrichment added included new clay piles, rocks, and trees to eat from. I also remember seeing Punch eat from a bale of hay suspended from a tall pole-like structure on one of my zoo visits. The biggest change by far was the implementation of protected contact management. This meant that zoo employees would no longer be allowed to be in the same space as the elephant, and there must always be some kind of barrier separating a person from an elephant. With this new system in place, that caused the zoo to end elephant aerobic demonstrations, and instead move to doing a more natural keeper talk and demonstration, where the keepers would work with the elephants from behind a fence. Speaking of training, that brings me to one of the most recognizable parts of the new exhibit, and that's the large African-inspired structure known as the training wall. This wall was to become the new spot for training demonstrations where elephants would walk up to the wall to be fed and to be inspected. It also came with built-in water where an elephant would press a button which sprays out water. Although I have noticed that the wall wasn't used much, as most keeper talks actually occurred on the sides of the exhibit, probably so people could get a better view of the elephants. The elephant barn also saw some changes, like newly installed doors, gates, and rubber flooring. The outside of the barn was also repainted to have the same pattern as the training wall, and the safari van was removed and a new garage door was added for entrance into the barn. Finally, this new renovation and new standards for elephant care also saw the banning of a controversial tool used on elephants, known as the bull hook. However, the new standards did still allow keepers to tether or chain elephants when needed, which was something controversial even back in the 70s. But the zoo has clarified that the elephants are only chained for medical purposes, and for their safety when a keeper isn't present. They compared it to putting a saddle on a horse. While the zoo was still actively renovating current exhibits, they weren't quite done with changes just yet, as in 2016 they unveiled a new $180 million master plan. This is the current master plan the zoo is using. Among all the changes and additions would be a completely overhauled African section, with 2 large mixed-species savannas and a new elephant complex. This would include the current elephant yard, which would remain as is, but also the addition of a second elephant yard, which would take over the current Addax yard. This new elephant yard would be about the same size as the current yard, and about 20,000 square feet, which when added with the other exhibit would give the elephants around 47,000 square feet, or just over an acre. But that's not all, as a new elephant crossing gate would be added to both the current yard and the new savanna habitat, which would allow the elephants to have access to even more space, and be in the same enclosure as the other animals like giraffes and zebras. This would have been somewhat similar to what the Cleveland Zoo did with their elephant crossing exhibit. That new savanna exhibit would be nearly 2 acres big, which when in total with the elephants' own yards would give them just over 3 acres of land, a massive improvement over what currently existed. Fun fact, the 2016 master plan was actually an updated version of the zoo's old 1999 master plan, which itself included a new elephant exhibit. But I was unable to find any information regarding this master plan online, so I can't include it in this video. Also in 2016, the zoo helped participate in breaking the Guinness World Record for the largest display of origami elephants. This was started by the conservation group 96 Elephants to raise awareness of the plight of African elephants. The original world record was 33,764 origami elephants, and the group was hoping to reach 35,000 to represent the number of elephants killed in Africa for ivory every year. All zoos participated in this, with the Louisville Zoo providing 1,100 origami elephants. This proved to be a success, as not only did they beat the original world record, but they also reached the 35,000 goal, and then some. In total, with everyone participating, the number of origami elephants created was over 78,000, ultimately giving them the Guinness World Record title. While the zoo's elephant program was now up to modern AZA elephant care standards, there was still one thing that they hadn't done yet that was also required by the AZA. That being that zoos with elephants are now required to have at least 3 elephants. While Louisville only had Mikki and Punch, that was all about to change. In March 2018, the zoo announced that Mikki was pregnant with her second calf. She once again got pregnant from artificial insemination, with Jackson from the Pittsburgh Zoo once again being the father, as he was with Scotty. The zoo had tried to get Mikki pregnant for 7 years up to this point with no success, up until around October 2017. And just like Scotty, all that was left to do now was wait, as again, elephants are pregnant for 2 years. A public ultrasound was performed on Mikki in September, which allowed visitors to see zoo veterinarians working with Mikki to make sure her and her unborn calf were healthy. The zoo would continue to update everyone on Mikki's pregnancy with posts on social media. 2019 was a big year for the Louisville Zoo, as not only were they expecting a baby elephant, but that year also marked the 50th anniversary of the zoo. And let's just say they were ready to party like animals. Some things to happen that year include a new float for the Pegasus Parade, which featured many animals, including an elephant, as well as a few parties held at the zoo, which featured several animal mascots, including this elephant costume provided by Costume Specialists, the zoo's go-to company for renting out mascot costumes. As for the elephant residents, on July 9, 2019, Mikki was put under a 24-hour watch, as she was starting to enter the birth window, meaning she could give birth at any moment. Zoo employees once again spent long nights with Mikki just in case she went into labor. But finally, at long last, after 651 days of being pregnant, on Friday, August 2nd, 2019, at 11:24 p.m., Mikki gave birth to another healthy 275-pound baby bull. To celebrate the arrival of Mikki's baby, both the twin spires at Churchill Downs and the Big Four Bridge near Waterfront Park were lit up in green for the weekend. Everything that went on with Scotty's birth would also happen with this new baby, as keepers stayed at the zoo for a few days to make sure both Mikki and the baby were healthy. That entire first month, Mikki and the calf stayed inside the barn so they could bond. The zoo would post regular updates on social media featuring the baby, as many waited for his big debut. That day finally came on September 4th, 2019. The baby elephant ran straight out of the barn to greet as many fans who came for his big debut. And while the number of people who came to see him wasn't as much as Scotty got, the new baby still drew in crowds by the dozens. Now with the baby elephant introduced to the public, it was now time to give him a name. The zoo once again held a contest to find a name for the elephant, and while Scotty got around 12,000 names submitted, the new baby received over 15,500 names submitted. I remember participating in this contest online, but I can't remember what I wanted to name him. I think I was going to do something a little generic like Ellie or Elmo or something like that. Eventually it was down to 3 names, Walt, Rocket, and Fitz, with all having their own meanings behind them. The name Walt was suggested by Taylor Barr, and was of course a nod to Walt Disney, also because his mother was already named Mickey. The name Rocket was submitted by Tatiana Mulkin, on behalf of her daughter Sophia. The zoo had previously named a baby bongo Groot, so they wanted to stick with the Guardians of the Galaxy theme and name the elephant after Rocket Raccoon. And finally, the name Fitz was submitted by Christian Hayes, and was named after her grandmother who loved elephants. Once these names were revealed, the zoo had people vote on which name they liked the most. At last, in October 2019, the zoo held a press conference to announce the baby's name. So what was the winner? Fitz. Although fun fact, the name Rocket almost won, but Fitz ultimately won due to the elephant keepers preferring Fitz over Rocket. With Fitz now named and officially welcomed to the Louisville Zoo family, almost immediately the zoo began to capitalize off him. The zoo's main gift shop was filled with elephant plushies and Fitz-branded merchandise and t-shirts. During the winter months of 2019, the zoo gave visitors a chance to go into the elephant barn to see him, since it was too cold for him to be outside. Interestingly, the zoo often said it was the first time ever visitors could go inside the elephant barn, but as you've seen throughout this video, that's not true, as up until the recent renovation, you could still book behind-the-scenes tours and have the chance to meet the elephants up close, like when actor Sean Astin, known for Lord of the Rings and the Goonies, met the elephants during his trip to the zoo in 2012. Though I'm not sure they count behind-the-scenes visits, I'm pretty sure they were referring to the general public. One of the more frequent things the zoo did was on their social media accounts they would post videos or photos featuring Fitz every Friday. These were dubbed Fitz Fridays, and it featured Fitz doing all kinds of cute things a baby elephant would do, like running around, trumpeting, playing in the rain, mud, or clay, or encountering and chasing the local Canadian geese the zoo has all over property. By 2020, Fitz Mania was still going strong, but soon that craze would take a trumpeting halt, as in March 2020 the zoo closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But while the zoo was closed to the public, zoo employees still came into work to take care of the animals. As for Fitz, the Fitz Fridays post never stopped, as the zoo would continue to post updates about him as well as featuring him in virtual training demonstrations. Even though Fitz didn't do any of the tricks himself, he just watched Mickey do them. At this point, Fitz's posts on social media drew in thousands of likes and comments. Eventually the zoo did reopen, and even with the social distancing and reduced capacity, Fitz continued to draw a crowd. I first saw Fitz in October 2020, and that was my first time ever seeing a baby elephant in person. I then didn't see him again till 2022, when I visited him on World Elephant Day, which was also when the zoo celebrated his and Mickey's birthdays, and he was playing with a large tire at the back of the exhibit. Moving forward to 2023, Fitz was now weighing in at 2,000 pounds, and the zoo began to introduce him to Punch. The reason it took a while to introduce the two was because Punch was the matriarch, and there was concern she could hurt Fitz with him being so small and quite a handful. And while there were a few instances of aggressive behavior, nothing bad happened. Actually, Punch would often teach Fitz to do things he wasn't supposed to do. But then, on June 25th, keepers noticed something odd. Punch kept putting her trunk in Fitz's mouth, which is abnormal behavior. Fitz was also acting lethargic and not his playful self. Fearing the worst, the zoo took a blood sample and sent it to the Smithsonian National Zoo in Washington, D.C., who are leaders when it comes to elephant care and conservation. When the results came back, it wasn't looking good. On June 28, 2023, the zoo announced that Fitz was diagnosed with EEHV, also known as the Elephant Endotheliotropic Herpes Virus, a truly awful disease commonly found in elephants both in captivity and in the wild. And while the disease can affect elephants at any age, it is most fatal to younger elephants who have been weaned, as they no longer have access to their mother's antibiotics. The survival rate is also very low. Only about 20 to 30% of affected elephants survive the disease, and up until recently, there was no vaccine. So now knowing about the virus, you can only imagine the shock and fear when the zoo found out Fitz caught it. He was immediately taken off exhibit and quarantined. Once news broke, other zoos offered medical experts and sent blood and plasma donations to Louisville. Fitz also received antiviral medications, blood and plasma transfusions, and stem cell and supportive therapies. On Friday, June 30th, he was tired but eating and standing, but his condition got worse and worse until at 11 p.m., during his nighttime treatment, Fitz passed away at the age of 3. The following day, when the zoo made his death public, a press conference was held with zoo personnel and zoo director Dan Maloney to discuss Fitz's death and the overall elephant program. It was mentioned that both Mickey and Punch were both tested for EEHV, and it was found that Mickey had a small strain of the virus, but because she was older, she was able to fight it off and live a normal life. They also addressed Scotty's death and if Fitz's death was related. The answer to that is no, as both deaths were an unfortunate coincidence. It was also mentioned that Fitz would be Mickey's final calf, and that there wouldn't be a third elephant. Other points brought up included the future of the zoo's elephant program. They mentioned the elephants needing a bigger enclosure, and a larger family group similar to what the zoo previously achieved with gorillas. They also pretty much confirmed that the 2016 master plan idea for elephants wasn't happening anymore. After Fitz died, the zoo put up temporary memorials at both the front entrance and at the elephant exhibit, where people could leave flowers and drawings and letters all paying respect to Fitz. They would also do a t-shirt fundraiser with the proceeds going towards EEHV research and an eventual vaccine. For the rest of 2023, all was quiet. There wasn't much elephant-related news or updates. That was until December 2023. During this time, the soon-to-be former director of the Cincinnati Zoo, Thane Maynard, went on a podcast called That's So Cincinnati to talk about the zoo. At one point, he began talking about the Cincinnati Zoo's new elephant trek exhibit, which was still under construction at the time, and how other zoos over the years have phased out elephants. And well, here's what he said.
So it's kind of either go big or go home for elephants. Lots of zoos have gotten out of the elephant business. Louisville is sending their final ones to a sanctuary in Tennessee.
That's right. Apparently Louisville was planning to send Mikki and Punch to the elephant sanctuary in Tennessee. But then if that was the case, why hasn't Louisville themselves made it public information? Perhaps the plans were still being finalized? Maybe this was just a rumor. All we could do now is wait and see what Louisville themselves have to say about this. And just a few months later, we got our answer.
We've got some bittersweet news out of the Louisville Zoo today. The zoo's two elephants, Mikki and Punch, are retiring.
On March 14th, 2024, the zoo officially announced that Mikki and Punch would be leaving and retiring to the Elephant Sanctuary in Tennessee. This news came as a complete shock for everyone, unless you worked for the zoo, were a part of a zoo forums group, or you listened to the previously discussed podcasts. Although after Fitz's death, there were some hints that elephants may not stick around in Louisville for much longer. Some examples include fewer mentions of them on social media, and when the zoo updated their front entrance photo op, an elephant wasn't featured amongst the other animals like before. The news was met with mixed emotions. While most were happy for Mikki and Punch to retire, others were left saddened and devastated. Fortunately, the move wasn't scheduled until spring 2025, so there was still plenty of time for visitors to come and say their final goodbyes. The news of the elephant's retirement also left many questions regarding the whole situation. Thankfully, the zoo reassured everyone with answers. Some questions include why after all these years was Louisville just now phasing out elephants? The truth is that it was always planned for the elephants to be sent to another facility once they got older. You see, for each animal, the zoo creates a plan for all stages of their life, and for the elephants, I'm assuming since the zoo didn't have much knowledge and resources for caring for elderly elephants, it was better to send them to a place that can meet their needs. Also, while Fitz's death wasn't the main cause for the relocation, it did speed up the process, as after his death, the zoo fell under the 3 elephant requirement set by the AZA, and in this day and age, it's hard for zoos to acquire more elephants. And with Louisville's elephants getting up there in age, there was concern that one could be left by themselves if something bad happened to the other. The zoo also wanted Mikki and Punch to be able to retire together, and since they were still young enough to travel, it was a matter of now or never. As for why the Tennessee Elephant Sanctuary was chosen for Louisville's herd, it was because at the time the zoo was preparing to retire them, the sanctuary just so happened to be accepting animals. Not to mention it was only 4 hours away from Louisville, so traveling wouldn't take too much of a toll on the elephants. Soon after the announcement, the zoo put a large crate inside the elephant exhibit, and it would be used to teach the elephants how to handle being in it during their travel. This is one of the reasons why it took over a year to send the elephants to the sanctuary. In January 2025, Punch would have her final birthday in Louisville, where she would be turning 55. Her birthday was themed after the Red Hat Society, and anyone who wore a red hat to the zoo that day got a $1 discount. Fast forward to spring 2025, as the day of the elephant's departure grew closer, the zoo decided to give them a big send-off in the form of a weekend-long celebration. On April 19th and 20th, the zoo held a celebration honoring Mikki and Punch, where members of the public were invited to share memories of the elephants and to visit them. Some highlights included special keeper talks, many collages of old photos provided by the zoo and social media followers, and a large card dedicated to the elephants where people could sign it and leave special messages for them before they left. Fun fact, the event was originally supposed to be held on April 12th and 13th, but due to bad weather it was moved to Easter weekend. Finally, in June 2025, the elephants officially began their depart to the sanctuary. Mikki and Punch were to be driven separately while being accompanied by a Louisville zookeeper, who would then help them acclimate to their new habitat. Punch left first on June 3rd, while Mikki left the day after on June 4th. Both then made the 4-hour drive to Hohenwald, Tennessee, just south of Nashville, where the sanctuary was located. 56 years ago, the first elephant arrived to the zoo, and 56 years later, the last elephant left. Once both elephants arrived, they were at first separated, but later reunited inside one of the sanctuary barns. At the sanctuary, Mikki and Punch will have access to what the sanctuary calls the Hickory Barn, which includes a 137-acre habitat, which is 137 acres larger than their previous home at the zoo. As of the making of this video, Mikki and Punch are still adjusting to life at the sanctuary. They are continuing to explore the habitat, and the sanctuary started to introduce them to the other elephant residents. But now you're probably wondering, what about the zoo? What are they going to do now that the elephants are gone? Well, fortunately, they already had plans. At the same time the zoo announced the elephants' retirement, they also mentioned what would happen to the now former elephant exhibit. It was confirmed that once the elephants left, the exhibit would be repurposed into a brand new exhibit for the zoo's rhinos, since just like the elephants, they too are in need of a new enclosure. At the time of this recording, the zoo's lone rhino, Letterman, is still in the current rhino habitat, as the move won't be happening till probably next year. But the big question many began to ask after the announcement was made was, will elephants ever return to the Louisville Zoo? As of now, there really is no definitive answer. The zoo has said that it could happen as part of a future master plan, but it won't be happening anytime soon, if ever, as a new elephant exhibit would have to be able to hold both a multi-generational breeding herd and a bull herd, which would not only require a lot of space, but also cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Right now, the zoo wants to focus on updating currently standing zoo exhibits and facilities before considering bringing back elephants. The big zoo project now is the upcoming $40 million Kentucky Trails expansion slated to open in a few years. So if I had to guess when and if the zoo will discuss elephants again, it would probably be after Kentucky Trails is finished and proven popular. And that brings us to today. As of November 2025, Mikki and Punch are happily enjoying retirement in Tennessee, and elephants are no longer at the Louisville Zoo. The now former elephant exhibit still sits empty and blocked off while waiting for an eventual newcomer to take over, and Louisville's future with elephants is still undecided. But whether or not Louisville brings elephants back, we will at least have this video to remember them, and of course the memories we've made throughout the years, and just like an elephant, we will never forget them. And with that, this finally concludes the long history of elephants at the Louisville Zoo. And there you have it, the complete history of elephants that once lived at the Louisville Zoo. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. Sorry it took a while to make. There was a ton of information I had to research and put together into a script. I've actually been working on this video since 2023, even before the elephants were announced to be retiring, and it was a lot of fun to research and learn more about my hometown zoo. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Please like, share, and consider subscribing. Do it for the elephants. And comment down below if you've visited the Louisville Zoo before, or if you have any memories of the elephants or anything I discussed in this video. Also, let me know if I missed anything, because while I may have the memory of an elephant, stuff still slips by. Also, let me know if you want me to do this with other animals the Louisville Zoo had, or currently have, as I found tons of interesting trivia about them, and there's quite a few I'd like to discuss, like the rhinos, giraffes, lions, tigers, bears, oh my. And what about the monkeys and apes? Or what about an interesting story involving one of the zoo's zebras? I will definitely make videos about it if you want me to, and if this video does well. Thanks for watching, bye bye! Wait! Hold on! We're not done yet! What if I told you that elephants are still at the Louisville Zoo? And no, I'm not talking about the statue. If you go into the giraffe house, you'll find an exhibit that currently houses rock hyraxes. Now I know what you're thinking. Nathan, those are just rats. You said there were elephants. Well, while the hyrax may look like a weird chinchilla gopher-looking guinea pig thing, they're actually closely related to elephants, as they are both in the same family and have the same features, like their feet and tusks. So while they may not look it, they're not irrelevant to the video.